All right, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the recent cheering that's going on in regard to the conversions of Russell Brand and Candace Owens. And the Roman Catholics are they're euphoric. They're like a 2007 era fedora wearing, neck bearded dude making memes about frickin' spaghetti monster. They're euphoric. But is this really a case to be euphoric? Now, first of all, I do think it's great that so many people are genuinely beginning to question good, evil. They want to seek out authentic religious experience, authentic worship, spirituality. That's all great. It's great that Russell Brand is moving in the direction of finding Jesus fascinating and wanting to follow our religion. It's great that Candace Owens has been on that track as well for a while. But one thing that a lot of Protestants especially miss is that it's not just a question of establishing a personal relationship with Jesus. There's also the question of like what church we join. Because although I wish it wasn't as complex and, difficult in terms of the religious spectrum that's out there, unfortunately it is. That's just the reality of where we're at and how things are right now. And the problem with fraudulent facsimile, churches or whatever, para-synagogues, para-churches, so-called churches, in our view, is not the fault of the person. So I'm going to be really clear because this always gets people upset. It's not the person who's seeking it out that they have bad will or bad motivation. It's that the facsimile groups and churches are not going to have the medicine to give the healing. So again, it has nothing to do with that person's sincerity. I have no idea whether Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson's wife, Candace Owens, I hope that they are sincere and I want the best for them. I want them to be saved. I want them to come to a full knowledge of the truth and, all the things that Paul talks about in his epistles. But the problem with heterodox churches, groups, sects, and so forth is not, again, the fault of the individual entering them necessarily. I mean, they could be entering them for bad reasons, and in that case, it would be the onus would be on them. But that if those groups don't actually have the medicine, it's kind of like, I'm making an analogy to, let's say you were in a town where there was a real hospital, a fraudulent hospital, a hospital that, had placebos, right? So you've got a couple options. And is it your fault that you go to the wrong hospital? Not necessarily. So you're not necessarily involved in any sin or any mistake, but the hospital that has the placebos, it's not ultimately going to be able to heal you. And the problem with the facsimile positions is that what happens is over time, a lot of people feel like when they don't get what's promised on paper, then they get mad at the religion. Then it becomes, as we pointed out many, many times over, it's an atheism engine. Then people are like, well, I don't really care about that anymore. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. The best example of this most recently is Kanye. Kanye claimed that he was a convert and he was all a follower of Jesus, and this was his whole thing the last few years. But it was to, I guess, his own kind of form of evangelicalism or whatever he believed. So it wasn't a Christianity that was really rooted in anything beyond, Kanye's own concoctions or whatever. And I'm sure that that's not the totality of it. Maybe he's undergone, maybe he has his own problems with, other things or trauma. I don't know. The point is not to judge these people. It's just that if you go into these facsimiles, they can produce even worse situations. Not in every case. I mean, sometimes people go into the Roman Catholic Church, and then, for example, this week I had somebody reach out to me that had become Roman Catholic, I think 5 or 6 years ago. And then they're now thinking, hey, maybe Rome's not where it's at. Tell me more about your Orthodox position. So it doesn't always necessarily lead to atheism, but these kinds of, clown church phenomena, and, I think it's maybe more worse in the mega church, clown church world. But it can still happen in the elements of clown church that exist in the Roman Catholic Church, the Papal Church. So I want to talk briefly about the five big main copes that most people have still to remain Roman Catholic, and then what the solutions are, and then we'll open it up to people who disagree, people who challenge it. We're going to talk a little bit too about how Protestantism isn't the correct reaction against Roman Catholicism, but that rather it went into a ridiculous extreme in the wrong direction. So Protestantism is not going to get you the medicine that the Roman Catholic Church at least claims to have with its sacraments and so forth. And so I kind of listed out my 5 most common. People are always asking me about coughing. So it's because where we live, it's near a giant 12-mile preserve. And at this time, the allergens are like literally in the red like every day. Especially around 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock is when it gets really bad. So it's a lot better earlier in the day. But it has nothing to do with like, when are you going to go see a doctor? It's not a doctor can't solve allergens, dude. So what are the 5 copes? And then what's kind of the overriding cope? And then why is Protestantism not really a solution? And then we'll open it up to people who have disagreements, questions, challenges, arguments, debates, etc. over on X. So if you're interested in calling in, the link is right here. You can call in there to the space. And then I will pull you up. Thank you. Already getting some fat super chats. Appreciate that. I will pull you up, give you the microphone. And you can make any questions, challenges, arguments that you want. First point is that I hear most often nowadays as to why people are remaining there is that this came up the other day in the Blonde in the Belly of the Beast stream. Well, I should stay in the Roman Catholic Church because it's my job, it's my duty to reform it and to fix it. And the problem with this, as we pointed out in that stream, is that the nature of that institution, the way it's structured, is not going to allow you, as the bottom of the totem pole, even if you have great numbers, to alter dogma. The dogmatic level has already been solidified when it comes to Vatican II, when it comes to Nostra Aetate, when it comes to the changes in the dogmas, such as changes in the death penalty, changes in what's appropriate in terms of priestly blessings for skittles, changes when it comes to the issue of what's appropriate for people receiving communion. That has changed in the Roman Catholic Church. Changes at the dogmatic level in terms of whether it's acceptable and appropriate to worship with and amongst pagans, with and amongst heterodox, with and amongst Muslims, all of which things the post-Vatican II papacy has done. And those are not just private sins. Those are actually sins that in the Roman Catholic system constitute apostasy. If you don't know, the Roman Catholic system is actually full of tiers, not just of sins in terms of mortal sin, venial sin, but also that canon law dictates different types of sins that remove you from the church and that are actions so severe that they sever you from the mystical body. And the same is true for clerics as well. Clerics aren't exempt from that just because they're clerics. If you ask typical Roman Catholics this, if you say if the Bishop of Milan stands up and starts preaching against the Trinity, does that make him a heretic? Or is he a heretic only when the papacy calls him a heretic? Well, I think most Roman Catholics tend to think, well, he's a heretic in virtue of the heresy. And even if he is in error, he's still a heretic. Or even if he's in good faith. Now, I don't know how you could be in good faith and not believe in the Trinity, but they'll make all kinds of specious arguments like this to rescue the system. And so what you have there is, in philosophy, we call this an unfalsifiable system. And pretty much at every juncture in the Roman Catholic system, there's sort of this little firewall, so to speak, where anything that comes up immediately meets the unfalsifiable sort of magic move that goes on to where, this appears to be a contradiction, this appears to be a change, it's not infallible. So this is the first move they always make. Oh, well, you see this wasn't infallible, and so this can change. And this goes along with the idea of I can fix it, because in both cases, the individual Roman Catholic is taking upon themselves a position that, first and foremost, is not allowed for the laity. The laity in that system are not able to, quote, fix the church, because the laity are not in a position to judge the first see. And every Roman Catholic who's angry with Francis and all the post-Vatican II reforms and all of what's going on, all the scandals, is already incorrect, because although they might have a position to say that, I don't know, if Francis was, let's say he's like one of the Borgias and he has a giant a whorehouse or something built. And okay, you might say that a Roman Catholic individual, lay person could say that that's immoral. But it's different when it comes to theological teachings, or what's called the ordinary teaching of the church. In the Roman Catholic world, anything that's part of the ordinary teaching, whether it's infallible or fallible, the expectation is that you submit to it with docility. That means you're docile. That means that you're not picking it apart and deciding what you think is orthodox, what you think is faithful, what you think is correct, what's not correct. Do you understand? That's different from the moral infractions that an individual pope might commit. We're talking about within their system, right? So it's true that, if Francis, let's say Francis had a giant whorehouse, he wouldn't necessarily be a heretic. And within their system, that's consistent. That's true. They're not on the hook there. They haven't committed any philosophical contradictory mistakes by saying, well, the Pope can be an evil person. The difference, especially in the post-Vatican II period, is that it's not a question of the individual sins of the papacy towards this or that moral question. It's specifically a question about changes in dogmatic teaching. And that's the whole point, supposedly, of the papacy, that it can't change dogmas. Nothing in terms of faith and morals undergoes change. And the reason that the papacy is there is to be the guide, the protector, the preserver, the progenitor, and the interpreter of that apostolic faith, of that deposit. That means, as Vatican I concludes, that the Roman See cannot err in questions of faith or morals. Now, it's true that the Pope could, as a private quote-unquote theologian, make a theological error. That is not the same thing as the Pope, even as a private theologian, being a heretic. So you see, this is another unfalsifiable firewall, a move they'll make to say, well, Francis's extremely scandalous teachings and ideas, they're just his private opinions. No, they're not. And by the way, even if they were his private opinions, there's nothing about saying something in a book or in a letter that excludes you from being a heretic. And if you remember one of the recent open forums that we had a person calling in on this very question. And the example that the Sixth Council used to condemn and excommunicate Pope Honorius was a letter he wrote to another bishop. It wasn't a public dogmatic profession. It wasn't something he proclaimed ex cathedra. None of that was necessary to be a formal heretic. And so the outs that they have to try to get around these things are things that don't actually even work in their system. There are myths. Almost every out they use is some myth that they've concocted, such as the idea, for example, the most common one is that, well, the Pope didn't bind anyone to that teaching, and so he's not a heretic. Okay, binding people to a teaching has absolutely nothing to do with heresy. Martin Luther was a priest. Martin Luther had no authority to bind anyone in a dogmatic sense to his teachings. And yet he is excommunicated and called a heretic in the famous encyclical by, I think, Leo X, because he persistently taught error. That's all that's necessary. To be a heretic has nothing to do with the authority that you possess in the office to bind or to not bind people. So this is a total fallacy of irrelevance. It's completely irrelevant to the question of whether the person is teaching something heterodox in whatever form. It doesn't matter whether they publicly profess it with their voice. It doesn't matter whether they write a letter. If the Bishop of Milan writes a letter to his grandmother and expresses that he no longer believes the Trinity, that makes him a heretic. That action. Now, it may not get discovered until, I don't know, grandma of Milan takes it to the, let's say she takes it to the Pope. She's worried about her grandson. The Pope sees it. The Bishop of Milan is heterodox. He's already committed the sin of heresy. He's already removed himself, even if there's not been a public juridical declaration. That's the Roman Catholic canon law and moral system. That's how it functions. So again, what we see is that most of the time, the objections, the copes, the explanations that are given are complete myths and fantasies. For example, the myth that I only have to believe the quote dogmas. This is the next cope of the top 5 copes. The first one is that I can fix it. No, you can't, because as a layperson, you're not in a position to fix Vatican II, to reform the Church of the Spirit of Vatican II. You're not going to get rid of Nostra Aetate. You're not going to convince the Catholic world that Nostra Aetate is a document with a level 7 degree of authority, which you can reject or accept based on your own decisions. Every Roman Catholic church in the world that I've been to that's a Novus Ordo church expects that you accept all of the documents of Vatican II. And the same principles in Nostra Aetate are in the dang frickin' catechism. The very phrases and statements about Muslims and Hindus and everyone worshiping the same quote-unquote God, the same principles and ideas are in the frickin' catechism. So even if you said, well, the Nostra Aetate is not the full dogma, I don't have to accept it, I can pick and choose the Vatican II documents, which ones are... No, you don't. No, you can't. Every Catholic church you attend in the world has the general default expectation that you accept all the documents of Vatican II. So the idea of I can fix it is just completely naive, completely contrary to the structure of this hierarchical organization, and completely laughable in light of what Vatican I actually teaches about the infallibility, inerrancy, and indefectibility of the Roman See, of the Pope. Number 2 cope is, I only have to follow XYZ. This is a amazingly prevalent myth in the Roman Catholic world. Where did you get the idea that you, quote, only have to follow the, quote, ex cathedra statements? Number one, there's not actually a list of the ex cathedra statements. And that's why every Roman Catholic comes up with a different list of what the ex cathedra necessary beliefs are. Furthermore, Vatican I is emphatic and states more than once that you also have to believe, beyond the ex cathedra, you also have to believe the universal ordinary teaching, and you have to submit to the ordinary teaching, which can be fallible, but yet with docility. So that's a complete myth. It's absolutely not true that as a Roman Catholic, you only have to believe and accept a handful of, quote, dogmatic or ex cathedra things. It's just made up. It's a myth that one guy, one apologist, one Catholic person says, and then all the other ones just chirp it out and repeat it as if it's true because they heard it somewhere. And they always just chirp out and repeat like mina birds, the same phrases, the same copes, the same responses. And they never even think to consider, well, is that even true? Is it even the case that I only have to believe a handful of dogmatic things? Again, we've highlighted and cited multiple times on Twitter. We've put it up countless times. In Denzinger, there's at least 4 places where it says you even have to accept the Pope's juridical decisions. If the Pope says so-and-so is excommunicated, you have to accept it. You don't get the liberty of saying, I think he's wrong there, I don't accept that. It doesn't matter what you want to accept. You don't get to be a Protestant Roman Catholic. And most of the people who think, I only have to follow blah, 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 by the way, there's never a consistent, coherent idea of what the handful of dogmatic things even are. They're missing the entire point that they're actually being a Protestant. They're just not being a Protestant with the Bible. They're now being a Protestant with, quote, papal teachings. I will go through and sift through thousands of pages of documents and pick out the ones that I've decided through my fallible mental individual intellect line up with the previous, quote, dogmatic teachings. And yet, no layperson is a member of the magisterium. No layperson has that authority. No layperson is ever granted the ability or the authority to, quote, judge the first see. Judging the first see does not mean that only that you have the canonical privileges to judge it and excommunicate. They have this other cope where they say, well, judging the first see means to excommunicate. No, whoever thought that laity had the ability to excommunicate the Pope or the bishops anyway? That's a completely absurd argument. Nobody has ever thought that. That'd be like, so as if it's addressing some impossible absurdity that nobody ever even considered. As if there was a whole bunch of people thinking that the laity could excommunicate the Pope, so they needed to have this statement in canon law that no laity could judge and excommunicate the Pope. It's just completely silly, completely stupid. Obviously, the point is that no one in the church, bishop, council, laity, even the Roman College, none of them have the authority or the ability to judge and supersede the Roman See. Clear as day. That's the clear and obvious meaning. And by the way, all these people believe in foundationalism and self-evident truths. Is this not self-evident in your ridiculous position? In your pseudo-Talmudic religion? Is this not obvious? Of course it's obvious. And everybody knows that that's the exact argument they make to every Protestant. Every Roman Catholic, when they make these arguments to the Protestants, they're suddenly ultramontanist super papists. And then when they're in their inter-Nicene conflicts, oh, now you see we're papal Protestants picking and choosing where Francis is faithful and where he's failed. But they're not even honest with the people that they think and pretend are their trad popes. Benedict XVI has numerous statements throughout his many books which are absolutely condemned via Pius X, the Pacendi Dominici Gregis encyclical's list of what counts as modernism. that would condemn multitudes of the statements in Pope Benedict XVI's books as modernist. The book Addendum to Vatican I Lamentabili, which has a list of condemned modernist propositions, also would condemn countless places in the totally modernist books and writings of Benedict XVI. I'm talking about his books, his theological books before he became a pope. And all of these people, by the way, will cite the trad stuff like the Holy Office condemning books. Oh, wait a minute. Why would the Holy Office condemn books if private theologians and their private opinions don't make you a heretic? Of course they do. The very praxis of your Holy Office condemning the writings of this or that Jesuit, this or that person in the church, putting it on the list of forbidden books, disproves your dumb argument that you have to bind people to it to make it heresy. So at every stage, what these people do is modify and change their position to make the position unfalsifiable. Do you know what I mean by an unfalsifiable position? We talk about this, for example, Marxism is typically critiqued in philosophy as an unfalsifiable position. Why is this? Well, in Marxism, problems, as I'm sure everybody knows, they all come from class warfare. And so if you attempt to critique Marxism or refute it, all of your arguments are automatically canceled out because the only person who would critique or oppose Marxism is somebody who has false consciousness from the bourgeoisie. So your arguments are already canceled out. But wait a minute. So no one can launch a critique of Marxism? Correct, because anyone who does is automatically in false consciousness. So this is why it's typically called an unfalsifiable system, which is actually a system that's very weak. Because a very weak system doesn't need to set up these sort of ridiculous kind of fail-safes and tricks to make the system unfalsifiable. Yet, nothing compares to Marxism in terms of unfalsifiability, except the papacy and the papal system. And ironically, this is even what Dollinger said. I have Dollinger's book here. And he said at the time of Vatican I, when he was very reluctant to accept the definition at Vatican I, he said that, well, hereafter, Roman Catholic apologetics will be basically nothing but people defending the arguments of Vatican I and the Roman See. It will end up being a bunch of papal lawyering. And lo and behold, what do 90% of the Roman Catholic apologists do? But write books and defend the papacy all day long. Because that's now the locus of the religion. The whole religion now is, in essence, the soap opera of what's happening in Rome. However, at the same time, you're also told, and this brings us to our third cope, you're also told that what happens in Rome, I don't care. I don't even have to be concerned. I have literally no concern with what's happening in Rome and what Francis is up to. All I care about is I have the Latin Mass. I have a conservative Novus Ordo Mass. I go to church. I take my family to sacraments. I don't have to concern myself with what's going on in Rome. Well, if we don't have to concern ourselves with what's going on in Rome and we can ignore Rome, you're beginning to make the point that Orthodox have made all along. So Rome isn't really that relevant to your Christian faith and expression at the local level, is it? And yet when you were converting out of Protestantism, and yet when you were arguing with your Protestant friends, you weren't singing that line. You were telling them that you need the papacy. You need the papacy to know what the dogmas are, to know the faith, to know the truth, to be guided morally to the tough landscape of the modern world. And the papacy will guard and preserve and protect our morals so that they're not changing and subject to flux. Except that you've already adopted a position of doctrinal development, which undermines a static, unchanging morality. And why was that? Well, because that became one of the most popular ways to defend the fact that the Vatican I definition of the papacy was not present in the first 1,000 years. And as we've highlighted probably 500 times, Roman Catholic apologists will vacillate back and forth between correct. Vatican I's view of the papacy was always there from the earliest days. It was always taught. Oh, but it was also an evolving thing like a seed that grew into a tree. Okay, those are mutually exclusive positions. But Roman Catholic apologists have no problem trotting out whichever argument works the best in the case that they're in. So, is it true that you can follow a Platonic papacy in your head that is not connected to the one over in Rome? Absolutely not. 100% false. Again, a complete tradcat myth. You have to follow all of the teachings of the Roman See, even if you believe they are wrong if they're ordinary papal teaching. Now, here we could theoretically bring in, I don't know, Francis. Let's say Francis writes a private book that is scandalous. And could a Roman Catholic theoretically say, I'm not concerned with Francis's scandalous private theological book that he wrote? Sure, absolutely. Many Roman Catholics, I'm sure, are not concerned with the scandalous statements that Benedict XVI put in his books before he was Pope. They don't have to hold to those things or be concerned with them. Although, if private theological writings can be heretical, then in that case, it might be a problem, as we said earlier. But, I don't know, let's say that something, Francis wrote something that isn't necessarily heretical, but that a lot of Roman Catholics disagreed with. Could they dismiss that? Sure. Sure, of course. However, that's not the same thing as his encyclicals and his public apostolic constitutions and teachings. Anytime he's teaching on faith and morals in a public way for the church, and all encyclicals are for the church, they're ordinary teaching for the church, you must submit to them with docility. Even if you think there's an area that's wrong, or he didn't word this right, or this is absolutely theologically erroneous, you disagree with it, you don't have the right to rebel, to critique, or to go against the Roman See. And all of the examples that Roman Catholics will give of how they can disagree with the Roman See, rebuke the Roman See, correct the Roman See, all that does is undermine the teaching of Vatican I and prove the Orthodox attitude. Yeah, exactly. You're now operating like an Orthodox person, that there's no super bishop who has super quisatz haderach God powers. That's not the teaching of the papacy. Oh, really? You mean Dictatus Papae and Unum Sanctum? Those haven't been rescinded. They're still on the books. Do you even know what Dictatus Papae and Unum Sanctum says? Unum Sanctum says you have to accept the temporal authority of the Roman bishop to be saved. Well, the Pope took off his triple crown, so that's a symbolic gesture. Well, I thought dogmas don't change. I thought faith and morals don't change. So now to be saved post Unum Sanctum of Boniface VIII, it is necessary to believe in the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop, that he's the quisatz haderach. That is necessary for salvation according to that dogmatic teaching. But nowadays it's not, because I guarantee you if we surveyed a large portion of the Roman Catholic world and of the episcopate and of the cardinals, I'm willing to bet post-Vatican II, probably a majority of them do not believe in the temporal supremacy of the Roman bishop. Interesting. So why was it necessary for salvation in the 1300s to believe that? And now it's not necessary for salvation. This idea that the papacy guards the morals and keeps them static and unchanging is absolutely ludicrous and totally historically false. That's why this system has to set up so many fail-safes to keep it unfalsifiable. And an unfalsifiable system has the appearance of impenetrability and strength, but is actually very fragile. So no, you don't have the position to accept a Platonic chair of Peter that you are in communion with and that you're not concerned with over in Rome. Vatican I is very clear that the living successor to Peter is the embodiment of the teaching authority of Peter. There is no Platonic papacy in your head in the realm of the forms. The only papacy that exists is the one in Rome, where Francis is. So this is a complete Protestant fiction that you can create a magisterium in your head. And yet, what do we see but countless trad cats and conservative Roman Catholics doing this very thing? 4, this one is a funny one because this one comes up all the time. I saw it today. It was all over. The Catholic Church to be the true church because it's persecuted. Why? We wouldn't see so much corruption unless it's the true church. So let's follow the logic of this. So the more corrupt an institution is, the more godly it is. Remember when Michael Voris, many years ago, who eventually got outed? Michael Voris said that the most graced people were the ones that were the most tempted with proclivities, so shall we say. What? Well, this is the same logic of the more corrupt our institution is, the more we are validated. This is another weird type of unfalsifiable system. Because it doesn't matter how corrupt it is, how much chaos, insanity comes out with Gladio and the Vatican Bank and the CIA and all this kind of stuff, and the arms trafficking and the money laundering. Oh, well, that just proves, you see, even further, that we're the true church because it's super duper corrupt and thus persecuted. Yet at the same time, this very week, this very day, countless Roman Catholics came at me and countered me by saying, you have all these problems in your church. You have liberal bishops. You have a skittle bishop or two here or there. Your guy over here in Africa ordained a deaconess. You can't be the true church. Now, wait a minute. I thought corruption proved the true church. Oh, only when it's the Roman Catholic argument does it prove. You see how silly this is. Ridiculous double standards. So corruption proves the Roman Catholic Church. Corruption disproves the Orthodox Church. All of these arguments, I hope you guys can see this. This is why, having basic logic, understanding basic fallacies is so useful across the board. You see, all these are fallacies. Every one of these arguments is based on some kind of silly mental trick that is like a giant house of cards that falls apart right away if you really think about it. The last couple, 0.5 is going to be tied. There's two errors tied for, two copes tied for 0.5. And that is number one of the two, 5a. Well, I'm not going to leave the Roman Catholic Church. I'm not going to worry with the theology. It's my identity. This is my family tradition. Family tradition, right? In the words of Hank. Okay, what does that have to do at all with something being true or false? Oh, it has absolutely nothing to do with anything being true or false. And what do you say to a person who says, oh, well, I was raised in a bloodline satanic family. That's my family tradition. I'm going to remain in a weird Buddhist cult. Oh, I'm going to remain in Scientology. It's my family tradition. You see how silly this argument is. And yet, countless Roman Catholics will repeat this as if this is some sort of like strength, like show of strength. This is my family, my heritage. I'll always be a Roman Catholic. Now, let's flesh out some more fallacies associated with that. Wait, your heritage and your tradition. Wait a minute. If we keep going back far enough, wouldn't we reach pagans? Is that your heritage and tradition that you should actually go back to? You see how silly this is. This is a terrible argument. And don't the same people always bitch about, You Orthodox, you're all ethnic. You worship your ethnicity. Look at their ethnic. By the way, I'm an Italian Roman Catholic, and that's my heritage and my nationalism, and blah, blah. You see how silly this is? Constantly contradicting themselves. My family tradition. And yet every one of them would tell a Buddhist to convert when a Buddhist says, that's my family tradition. And then attached to number 5 as part B is Marian apparitions. Marian apparitions. I just had an interesting conversation with Father Deacon. And I thought I knew a lot about this. Apparently, there's this whole other apparition phenomena in Ireland. I'd never heard of it. And it's crazy. Now, Father Deacon Ananias knew about this because he studied, I think he did his doctorate in Ireland. And so he was over there for many years and spent a lot of time in the Irish Catholic world and saw a lot of what was going on. And he was explaining that when he was, in a phase of leaving Protestantism, he was raised, I think, Lutheran, and was trying to figure out, well, am I going to go Catholic? Am I going to go Anglican? Am I going to go Orthodox? He spent a lot of time kind of in the world of Irish Catholicism, and he went to this mystic site. I'm not sure what we want to call this, but this is pretty crazy. So this is it's called the House of Prayer Achill. And this is a woman who, in the 80s, Christina Gallagher, a housewife who was part of Karen's Grotto in Sligo. And she claimed suddenly to be having visions from the suffering head of Christ. And then Mary appeared. When Mary appeared, she claimed to have stigmata on her feet. And Mary told her to set up her house as the house of prayer. And it was at that time in the 90s opened by Archbishop Cassidy. It was then given a tax-exempt status. So this was not done initially outside of the purview of the hierarchy. The problem is that if you go back up here and read about this, it was quickly turned into the House of Prayer Limited. That is a trading company, a company that trades as Our Lady. It's a corporation. And so it became very controversial, even though it was originally given the blessing of the Archbishop there. And so even though it's a cult, the Roman Catholic Church did not do anything to excommunicate anyone or stop anything. And then we had alleged miracles. I think so I take that back, in the 1990s, later on by 96, the next Archbishop after Cassidy, Archbishop Neary, established a commission to investigate the claims of the phenomenon there. The investigation concluded no supernatural, but that the people gave evidence of good faith. So even still, it was kind of just let be. But what's very evident, as Father Deacon noted by his visits here, is that the whole thing is obviously a giant scam. They're not curing people from resurrecting babies. They're not curing pancreatic cancer. The woman isn't a stigmatist. It's a trading company, a limited trade company that trades as like a corporation. This is so obviously ridiculous. Now, well, that ain't Fatima. Well, that ain't Medjugorje. Oh, wait a minute. Fatima. Let's talk about Fatima for a minute, because although we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, if you want a longer treatise, we cover Fatima here. Yeah, people are like, can I buy stock? Yeah, look this up on Robinhood and see if you can buy stock in some stock in House of Prayer Limited. Everyone seems to have forgotten that last year, or was it 2 years ago? 2 years ago, all the Roman Catholic world erupted in gyrations and fervor tingling going up their leg that Francis was about to consecrate Russia and Ukraine, and that this would finally fulfill Fatima. Has everyone already forgotten this? I haven't forgotten, because we laughed and made fun of all the Roman Catholics at the time and said exactly what was going to happen, which is exactly what happened, which is absolutely nothing. Did they all forget this? Pope Francis is about to consecrate Russia. We're about to win. We're about to own the Ortho bros. They're going down. Finally, Mary has sided with us. Oh, nothing happened. Oh, it was a big bust, as we said. And then, turns out, what happens? Let's look at all the trotting out of Fatima. Have you not figured out that this gets rolled out whenever it's needed? And even the other trads have made this ridiculous chart showing how fraudulent and ridiculous Fatima is. 1942, Pius XII. Will Mary, will the commands of Mary be fulfilled? Order all the bishops to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart. Did Pius XII do that? No, he didn't order all the bishops. Did he consecrate it? He did a consecration, but he didn't order all the bishops, and Russia wasn't mentioned. But there was a consecration to the Immaculate Heart. Dang it! We came so close. A couple months later, Pius XII, he's going to do it again. No, he does the exact same thing again. Dang it! July 1952, Pius XII, he's finally going to, 10 years later. Dang it. He only gets 3 of the 4 criteria. He doesn't order all the bishops. He just consecrates Russia to the Immaculate Heart. So this is the most ridiculous code. You see how, look, you want to trot out Fatima to me? It's a miracle. If it's a miracle, why all this nonsense? Literally all they have to do is do these 4 things. Like every trad cat will pull up this dumb chart to explain, to cope as to why the papacy hasn't really done the consecration and fulfilled Our Lady's requests. I mean, how hard would it be for any of these people to do it? Oh, May 9th. Let's fast forward past Paul VI. 1982. John Paul II is going to do it. Oh, he just does a consecration of the world. Dang it. And not even the Mary. 1984. John Paul II. He orders all the bishops to consecrate the world. Dang. This is preposterous. Who could actually believe this? Well, only people who are locked into a ridiculous, unfalsifiable sort of cult. I don't know how else to describe this. And you understand that when you are actually in the Roman Catholic world, okay, 99.9% of people are not sitting around reading Denzinger. They don't know what Denzinger is. They don't have the faintest idea what Denzinger is. But they know about Fatima. And they'll make charts detailing like freaking fantasy football sports bros to figure out who did and didn't do what in the last 70 years in regard to this is preposterous. This is ridiculous. So if you understand, you're not just signing on to, I only have to believe 5 dogmas. No, you don't. You got to believe all this stuff too. I don't have to believe Fatima. It's not actually dogma. It is not part of the handed down magisterial and divine revelation. Yeah, but you are going to be laughed out of the Roman Catholic world if you don't believe Fatima, because for all intents and purposes, they receive it as dogma. It is essentially divine revelation in a practical sense. Have you met any Roman Catholics that don't believe Fatima? I've never met one. In fact, the Marian stuff is their ultimate fallback. They think this is like the ultimate irrefutable, unassailable, like, all right, well, they might have us on everything else, or they'll never get us on this. Really? I mean, is this the essence of the religion that Jesus established? Just basically mastering a giant role-playing game chart about Fatima? This is what Jesus has us up to, figuring out fantasy football charts about what was and wasn't completed. This is ridiculous. And another practical anecdote, when I was in the Tradcat world, I met tons of people who could tell you all of the arcana and the lore of Fatima. And they didn't know anything about the church fathers. They had no idea what Clement's letters were about, what Cyprian said. They never read Athanasius. They didn't know what was in the Bible. Tradcats actually laud and are proud of their ignorance of the Bible, but they will obsess over this crazy stuff. So that's what I'm getting at. You're not going to find the healing in this religion of dead works and all of this absurdity. You will find people eventually getting depressed, becoming alcoholics, drinking a lot, being unhappy because they're not being healed there. Because it's a religion that has the form and the loss of the power. And that's why Francis is all about open borders, and Francis is all about climate change, and Francis is all about all the other globalist policies. And so for all you conservative trads out there, Francis hates you. Francis despises you. In fact, half of the things Francis does is a middle finger to you. So the very person that you are trying to convince the world to come under is your worst enemy. And once you figure that out, you won't be in this group anymore. You won't be in this organized crime sect. Imagine thinking Jesus intended to have a giant international world bank for black ops. You think that's what Jesus... He's walking around the Sea of Galilee. He's talking to the apostles. Oh, and by the way, things are really going to be hype. Things are really going to be cool when we get a giant Vatican bank that has all the same usury and money laundering as all the other banks out there. Won't that be smooth? Won't that be awesome when we get that there? All right, we're going to open it up. Those are my 5 arguments. And for those who would like to read a really fascinating paper by an academic who, I don't know whether he's Catholic or what he is, but this is not a conspiracy paper. This is an in-depth academic analysis of one of the famous apparitions of recent note, the Bayside apparitions. This was one of the most fascinating geopolitics papers I've read in a long time. It's called The Virgin and the Bomb: The Bayside Apparitions, Cold War Anxieties, and Marian Anti-Communism. And the reason I recommend this paper is because it will give you a really in-depth insight into how and in what ways the Marian apparitions were absolutely used in the Cold War, especially for Western intelligence, psyops, and deception. That becomes very evident in this example. And even though it's not written as a, quote, conspiracy text, it doesn't have to be. I mean, even EMJ thinks that, like, Medjugorje was fake and was part of, like, psyops and stuff. Yeah, I just extend that to one more apparition known as Fatima. Right. Thank you. I did drink some tea. All right, we're going to open it up. We got people already requesting to speak. So the way this works is, for those of you in the chat, somebody says, oh, all the post-Vatican II ones are fake. Yes, exactly. So only post-Vatican II apparitions are fake. So even though we find the exact same patterns in the pre-Vatican II apparitions, no, only the ones after Vatican II are fake. We got a bona fide trad cat right there. And really generous donors tonight. Thank you so much. We've already gotten some wild, crazy, almost already $500 worth of super chats. Appreciate that. We'll go to that to those super chats here in a moment. I mean, we haven't even gotten into, I haven't even mentioned all the multi-faith center and all that stuff. The way that this works is you request to speak. I give you the microphone. You have to unmute yourself. Twitter automatically mutes the person that pops up to speak. Unmute yourself. When you come up, when it goes, when you hear the, unmute yourself. Don't make me have to say a million times unmute, because no matter what, people start talking, we don't hear you, I then have to tell you to unmute. Andrew, what's on your mind today? By the way, if you don't talk about the topic, I'm not bitching at Jeem or Hoplon or Andrew, just telling all the audience, the only acceptable topics today are Catholicism and Protestants. That's it. I don't care about conspiracies today. I don't want to hear about atheism, tag. We're not talking about any of that today. Only these topics. I don't care about Muslims, Islam, none of that. What's up?
Yeah, big fan of yours, actually. Follow Sam Sherpley. Loved you on there. The only thing that you brought up was the papacy. So here's where I'm wondering.
Okay.
This country, right?
You cut out. You're wondering what?
Love this country, right?
Do I love this country? You keep cutting out. Yes, I love my country, sure. Are you there?
Can we better?
You're cutting out. What now?
Is that better?
You can try. Go ahead. What's your question or comment? Go ahead. All right. We're not getting anything, man. Come out and come back in. Let's try to come out and come back in. Gene, what's up, brother? How you doing? You got to unmute, Gene.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, dog?
Not so much. I thought the other guy was talking. Did he cut out or something?
He cut out. I told him to come out and come back in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'll keep this pertinent on today's topic of Catholicism, although it does bleed into the subject of Islam as well. I just wanted to point out that per Catholic politics, the foundation of the country of Lebanon was also kind of sus, as the kids would say. The Catholics refused to take lands that had a large Orthodox population in Syria. Instead, they took Muslim lands, and that all fomented into the various civil wars and kind of the failed state that it is today. I just thought I'd mention that because a lot of people don't know the politics of the Eastern Catholics, which, to be fair, you've covered the Uniates and other things quite a lot.
Well, we've covered the theological issues, but we haven't really covered much of the political, geopolitical history of Uniates. So this is a gap area that you could speak to.
Yeah, just to clarify a little more, so the largest Christian sect in Lebanon are the Maronites. They're Syriac Eastern Catholics, and they've always been very tribal. I've had books written in the late 1800s where they're declaring holy war and they want to eradicate everybody around them. But then you have the Catholic Church out of Rome come on and say, actually, the Muslims worship the same God. Meanwhile, you guys are basically trying to bulldoze everybody in your path. So I just found it very interesting, that plus there's been a lot of Jesuit activity in Lebanon from the 1800s onwards. So just kind of the foundation of that country. A bit of background noise here. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Yeah, I want to remind everybody, too, that Jeem just had a great debate with a well-known pagan, atheist, whatever he is. So everybody should go to Jeem's channel and check out that debate. What's your channel called? Jeem Apologetics or just Jeem?
Yeah, just at Jeem Apologetics. Thank you for that. Yeah, actually, it's interesting because during the debate, Adam kept saying, "Oh, your master, Jay Dyer, doesn't want to talk to me. I've schooled him too much."
How has he schooled me if we haven't ever interacted? That's interesting.
He just claims that he eats Ortho Bros for breakfast. That's his claim.
Well, yes, I guess we have to submit to the Viking lords. The Viking, I mean, even though they don't even know like the first basics of what a fallacy is. I guess we'll just submit to the Viking lords. Now, one thing I wanted to mention too is also there's a lot of good resources on the history of the Uniates, and if you want, for those in the audience, a Roman Catholic admission, there is the book by Francis Dvornik, The Phocian Schism, which is great because this is what led the modern Vatican to this and other books, to basically say that all these Orthodox church fathers that we considered heterodox for so long, now they're cool. They can be saints now. This is another book, Yves Congar's book, After 900 Years, that you see here. This is another one of these. text with a lot of admissions. So people who are interested in that should check that out, because I think if you really dig into it, Eastern Catholicism is one of the strongest arguments against Roman Catholicism. I think a lot go ahead.
I was just going to point out, in addition to the Orthodox, they like graft in these Nestorian and Jacobite and all these people who essentially, if they were at a table, they'd be trying to kill each other, but somehow they make sense in the entire Roman Catholic system. How does that make sense?
I remember what I was going to say. When we went on our pilgrimage to Orthodox Italy, we went to San Maria Maggiore, which is where Mary's house is housed at this giant cathedral. And the cathedral, it's massive cathedral. It has like different sections related to different Catholic nations. And one of the funniest things that we noticed was that a couple of the side altars that are dedicated to these different nations, I think the Polish one, like a gigantic portion of all the murals that were painted in the Polish section were about like old school Polish battles with Muslims. And we were all laughing because, I mean, did they not read Nostra Aetate and realize that we're all just worshiping the same God? There's no need to have giant battles or crusades.
Yeah, I was going to mention one last thing real quick. Is I was just going to say, it's interesting how, like in the 1800s and stuff, like I said, the Maronites were, I mean, I don't even want to say the words on here, but they were like, let's just erase everybody around us.
Really?
When the Jesuits show up, and now into the modern age, you have some, I don't even know if they're considered heretical, Maronite priests who are reciting part of the Quran at their churches once in a while, just for the sake of ecumenism. And
Whoa.
it's like, well, 30 years ago, you guys are trying to eradicate everybody around you. How does that?
Wow. That's crazy. No, I didn't know that. I'm not surprised though.
Yeah. I'll hop off for now. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Gene, and everybody should check out Gene channel, Gene Apologetics. Appreciate that. Now, keep in mind too, this reminds me of he mentioned the Jesuits in Lebanon. There's also a pretty long-standing CIA presence in Lebanon, and I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't also connected to the Jesuit presence there too. I want to say Bob Baer mentioned a lot of CIA operations in his book. Now, he's a CIA operative, so I don't trust what he says, but he's at least admitting a lot of that presence. And I was just reading about, this doesn't really relate to Catholicism, but I remember what it was. I think Victor Ostrovsky, that's what it is. Victor Ostrovsky talks about certain operations going on when there was the big bombing in Lebanon, and you guys can figure that out. All right, next up, let's see. Andrew, you want to try again? Maybe you won't cut out now.
Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up, Jay? How you doing?
Yeah, you're coming in clear now. Go ahead.
Oh, awesome. So I just want to speak on the papacy trying to say before.
Are you holding your phone, like you're fading in and out? So are you like moving your phone or something?
I'm on headphones.
Is your hand over the mic like you keep fading out?
Is that better now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So what I say about the papacy, it's no different than our United States. Right now, we have a shit president who's instrumenting terrible policies, right? But that doesn't take away the essence of the office. We all know what America is and what it stands for. It's pretty much the same way for the Catholic Church. Francis is doing some weird things, but it doesn't take away from the fundamentals of what the church actually is.
Well, the problem is that you could make an analogy between the papacy and can you mute or something? It's really loud noise. Yeah, just mute until you're ready to talk again. The problem is that the analogy there only goes so far. So it's true that there's things about the presidency that could match up to the papacy, but the difference is that there's specific criteria and promises and beliefs about the papacy that don't match up or that map onto the presidency, such as the idea that Roman Catholic dogma can't change. And I'll give you one example. I mean, how can the death penalty be something that's considered natural justice? And now Francis says the death penalty is against the gospel. I mean, to me, that's clearly not just a change in dogma, but also something that's clearly moral.
Right, I understand what you're saying, but also look at the legislation that was just introduced with anti-Semitism. That doesn't change the First Amendment. We're still going to have free speech.
Yeah, but it's a false analogy. It's a false analogy because the papacy can't change dogma.
And nor can this House of Representatives change the First Amendment.
Okay, but the papacy. Okay, so Francis didn't change the dogma.
No, absolutely not.
But he did. So therefore, the contradiction.
But nobody believes it. Just because one pope.
Nobody believes it. No, I think you're actually in the minority. The majority of the Roman Catholic world follows Francis, and not you.
No. If they want to believe that, doesn't mean it's true. Just because one pope says one thing, that doesn't make it dogma.
I mean, actually, it does. I mean, have you read Vatican I? You can't go against the Roman See.
Well, of course you can, because everybody knows what the natural truths are. If the Pope came out tomorrow and said, yeah, sex before marriage is great, is everybody going to agree with him? It's not dogma.
You're not in the position to judge what is and isn't dogma. They decide that. You don't understand that's a basic principle of your religion?
But it doesn't matter what they say.
Oh, thank you. So Roman Catholicism is not true. It doesn't matter what the Pope says. Exactly. We're going to move on. Angel. Angel. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude. I think that pretty much proves everything I was saying in the first 5 points. Right? So the end result of that conversation is that it doesn't matter what the popes say. We follow the popes. Go ahead, man.
Hey, I unmuted on time. Let's go.
You did good. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. So I've recently been looking into Christianity. My background is like Islam, and then went into like some deep Wicca shit, like just crazy stuff, basically. I was basically wondering, like, the view of hell in Orthodoxy is
what?
Kind of the view of hell, like.
Okay, well, today's topics are Catholicism and Protestantism, so it's not Orthodox hell. I'm not trying to be rude, but.
No, I was just, the question's kind of different, so I was basically saying, you know, how people who worship Satan or Lucifer or any other, like, fallen angels, I guess, can they find peace or, like, any sort of comfort without God? Like, that's impossible, right? Like, because I used to think that would be possible, because even if there isn't God, you're going to be with that, you know, little demon that you really like. But as I read more, I'm just starting to feel like that's not the truth.
I wouldn't.
It was kind of a stupid question, but
no, it's. I mean, I think you're right. No, I wouldn't think they would be able to find peace. Hoplon, what's up? By the way, to the guy in the chat who's saying that the previous guy was correct, I mean, you're welcome to call in there. So his name was. Go ahead, Hoplon.
Hey, I just got a couple of questions, if you can entertain them.
Sure.
This isn't like argumentative. I'm kind of like standing in between Catholicism.
That's fine. You can argue or not argue. Whatever you want to do is fine.
Okay. So what are you exactly supposed to do as like a layperson? So I don't really think I'm smart enough to dissect all this. So what am I supposed to do when like the church gets things wrong, or like the papacy gets things wrong?
Well, I mean, I'm here to tell you to become Orthodox. So
okay. Well, my question on that is, like, you've got individual bishops like Elpidophoros, like he's doing the same things that you're claiming the Catholic Church is doing. So what would you say to that? All
right. So it doesn't. The argument has never been who has more liberals. Okay,
Okay.
That's never going to determine which position is true. The only way to determine which position is true is to, in fact, figure out which position is true. Because you can always point to, well, you have this guy, well, you got this guy. But one key indicator is that it's different when it comes to your system or to a Catholic system, because the Catholic system is built around one dude. If the Orthodox Church was built around Elpidophoros, that might be a good reply. It'd be like, oh, well, your dude's just as bad as Francis. But people just seem to have a hard time understanding that the Orthodox Church is decentralized. And the Patriarch of Constantinople, there have been many of them in church history who were heretics and excommunicated by the church.
Right.
But Vatican I sets up the entire structure of the Roman Catholic Church to be really built on whatever the guy in Rome's doing. And so it stands or falls with that guy. And if that guy goes crazy and starts doing all this stuff, as we've seen, post-Vatican II, like, that's the defeater for the system. The system itself has a bug within the system that cancels it out. You're not going to fix it from the bottom up. It's not a bottom-up system in the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying now. So if you're just like a layperson and you don't really hear about on the news about what the Pope's doing because you just don't pay attention, and you just go to church, you go to your Latin Mass, and you do the sacraments. I mean, since you're not an Orthodox Christian, are you condemned to hell, or what? How does that work exactly?
Well, I mean, it's not our position to judge you at a personal level and condemn anyone to hell. Like, we don't know that, but it's our position. It's our job to tell you to become Orthodox.
Okay, because I asked the priest that similar question, because I know plenty of good Protestants that I think they would meet the qualifications. Although I can't really say if they're in heaven or if they're in hell, but I'd like to think that they're not going to hell because they just don't. They haven't been exposed to that kind of stuff, or like they don't know. Like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, so this is kind of hard because I'm not really, I'm not gifted in this sort of realm to like be able to understand it.
Well, I mean, but you can.
Now that I've kind of like been exposed to like the truth, now I don't really have an option. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can begin to learn. You can begin to try to, understand it. So, you can start with, watching, I don't know, something like Rock and Sand, Father Josiah Trenham's talks. You can start watching my talks, and it'll come in time. Randall Doty. You got to unmute.
My bad. There was some lag.
It's okay.
So I heard you on Nephilim Death Squad, and I wanted to hear them ask you about your take on the Nephilim.
Right. So today's topics,
Orthodoxy.
But today's topics are Catholicism, Protestantism, and Orthodoxy. And I think I did mention that, I believe that Genesis 6 is about angels.
So from a Catholic view, what do you see established in that realm, and what do you see the differences in?
All right. Well, I don't think either the Roman Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church has a necessary dogmatic stance on what you think Genesis 6 and the angels are. But thank you for that. Big Joe, what's up, Big Joe? Octavian, $100. Thank you for the work that you do. I'm a Romanian Protestant in California. I'm working my way back to my family's old faith. Hey, that's great to hear, Octavian. I think Protestantism has spread a lot in Romania, and that's unfortunate, but glad to hear that you're moving back in that direction. What's up, Big Joe? Thank you for that generous super chat. Big Joe, you want to unmute? You there? Don't hear anything, man. Anthony, what's up, Anthony?
Hello?
Hey, what's up, Anthony?
Hey, what's going on, Jay?
What's on your mind?
I just wanted to call in. I was listening. I was hearing a bunch of, sounds like Roman Catholics not understanding, or maybe saying like they're not smart enough to kind of get into the weeds of things.
Yeah, we had a couple Roman Catholics so far that have said something like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to to chime in and say, like, so I used to be a Roman Catholic, and I used to be a traditional Roman Catholic, so like part of the SSPX and all of that. And I was introduced to you through, I think, my sister, Brittany Pettibone.
Okay, yeah.
And I started to listen to some of your work, and I didn't really take anything that you were saying at face value, but I went and I started to read all the documents that you were talking about in your videos, like Vatican I, which I recommend every Roman Catholic should read because it's only like 10 pages or something like that. And once you start going through church history and start reading all these documents, starting all the way from, like, you know, through the church councils, through Dictates Papae, or whatever that Pope in the 11th century was talking about, where he came out with all these dogmas saying that he's the prince of the world.
Yeah, Pope Gregory the Seventh. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get into that whole controversy with the changing of the creed, and what was going on with that. And I think there was like one pope. I think it was like Pope, I forget his name, but I think he was even killed because he was getting too close to like Eastern Orthodoxy to some extent, and like upholding the real creed without the Filioque and things like that. But I mean, the amount of evidence that's out there is ridiculous, and you don't need to be a genius. Like, I'm stupid, I'm slow, but if you can take the time to actually go through and read all those documents, it becomes pretty clear that Roman Catholicism innovates and changes throughout the ages. And, you know, I mean, look at where we are today with Roman Catholicism. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, okay, I don't want to get a PhD and all this stuff. You don't have to. Urban II calls crusades. We go from calling crusades to Benedict and Francis are praying in the mosques towards Mecca. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't take a PhD.
Yeah, to see, like, obvious contradictions, yeah, you don't have to be very smart to point those out. So I think I just wanted to chime in and just say, like, I wouldn't get overwhelmed with all the theology and all of the different arguments. I would just look at things more face value. I think things are more common sense than people make them out to be. And once I started looking into Orthodox, man, like, I was chrismated about a year ago. So this is going to be like my first real Pascha.
Oh,
and
congrats.
So I also just wanted to call in and just thank you, for pointing me in the right direction. I mean, it does take legwork. I think everybody should do the research by themselves so that they don't make like a hasty conversion. They don't know what they're doing. But
yeah,
Orthodoxy is absolutely, I'm convinced, the only true Christian faith.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it is Christianity. It's the Christianity that we see in the first, 700-800 years where the councils are occurring. Yeah, I think you nailed it. I appreciate your advice there. And it's not, it might come off as like tremendous amounts of reading, but it's not actually, I mean, you don't have to read like giant stacks of books. There's actually like a kind of a minimalist approach that you could do where you just read the canons of the councils, read Dictates Papae, Unum Sanctum, read Michael Welton's book, Two Paths. I mean, that's kind of like the basics all right there. You don't have to get, 5,000 books and read them all.
Yeah, and I would just say it's not a race. It took me, before I was chrismated, it took me like 6 months, I think, of just slowly going through everything, reading it, and just taking my time. Because I think, that's kind of the goal, is to just at least try.
Absolutely, people should take their time. Yeah, you do not rush it. Do not try to, make hasty decisions. Take your time.
Yeah, and I think it's also, when people see the amount of research, because this is what I've run into a lot too, trying to talk to people about Orthodoxy, they kind of just walk away because they feel like they need to, it's too much work, and they're comfortable where they're at.
Yeah.
And yeah, just take your time, slowly get into it. At the worst, you'll learn more about Christianity in general, church history and things like that, and you can come to your own conclusion. But I would say to everybody out there, like, don't get like discouraged with the amount of work. I mean, take 2, 3, 4 years. It's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody who does that is going to come to the same conclusion. So,
agreed.
Anyways, I appreciate the time, Jeff.
Thank you, man. God bless. Glad to hear that things are going well. Daniel Lotus. We got the dang Buddha over here. The Buddha is named Daniel. If you see Daniel on the road, is he there? You gotta unmute, bro. You gotta unmute, bro.
Yo.
Hey.
What's up? So, alright, let me get I got like a little thing. Just basic stuff I wanted to ask about. So basically I had like let's call him a peer who got really into, he was about to get baptized. And then he went like psycho and got into like the true Orthodox stuff. You know, maybe I don't know if that's me calling them psycho, but you know what I'm talking about. By true Orthodox, I mean like the guys that are schism from everybody. And then he eventually left and then became, went back to being a Catholic.
Okay.
So I guess like I'm a Catholic looking into this stuff. So I guess with the Pope, it's like you always say like the thing is Pope-splaining, you know, oh, you're just kind of saying that you're just explaining it and explaining away everything that the Pope does. Mm-hmm. But I mean, don't you kind of have to do the same thing with the Orthodox? And I know you're gonna say like you don't because it's a model of like you said
well, like for example, if the Patriarch of Constantinople teaches heresy, which he has done many times, that like there've been many Patriarchs of Constantinople that have been excommunicated, right? It's not devastating to the system if there's a heretical patriarch. If the Roman bishop is a heretic and teaches error, it's devastating to the system. It invalidates it.
Yeah, but like wouldn't the but you have these people online, like the true Orthodox would say, like even Kirill and like even the Patriarch in Antioch is a heretic too.
But their whole model is identical to the papal model of like a blackout, where if one person commits a heresy or makes a mistake, then the whole church goes into blackout. That's like the trad cat mindset. They have the identical. It's the identical model of the church as constitutes. So they never got the healing to realize that Christ didn't set the church up that way. It's impossible for the church to be that way. It would never survive. It's totally against history too, by the way, to think that God just shuts the grace off when somebody outside of your control, you know, is like, you know, doing something heterodox. That's not the Orthodox attitude. That's a very trad cat mindset of like everything has to be under some strict legal validity and that God is like a bean counter. I mean, it's just an insane view of God.
Yeah, but like if all the patriarchs are heretics, then like what's the deal?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that they all are, but in the Orthodox view, they're not heretics until a synod calls them or condemns them as a heretic. So while it might be privately appropriate if, let's say, you're underneath a bishop and you know that bishop is doing something heterodox, and you leave that church because you know that at a personal level, that's acceptable for you to do. But it's not like everybody else in some Donatist way gets deprived of grace because of something that they don't know or can't control. That's the crazy light switch model of like, well, the light's off, all the grace is shut off, God's a bean counter who's a psycho. I mean, that's the erroneous mindset. This guy, I don't know, your friend, whoever he is, I mean, he came into Orthodoxy with a radical rad trad mindset, assuming that Orthodoxy operates like traditional Catholicism. And I mean, we've seen a handful of people do this, and they usually go off into other religions. They don't usually return to Catholicism. They usually go off into something else. Is he still a trad cat, or is he in the Novus Ordo?
He's kind of like Novus Ordo, but he's not really like, he kind of has like weird beliefs. Like he's kind of like a Neoplatonist type guy, but like he's like just goes to Catholic mass.
Okay, so I think there's other things going on with people that have this kind of a thing, where it's sort of like a probably Spurgy type of attitude of like expecting this sort of this extreme perfection attitude, which it makes sense in the Tradcat mindset because I mean you have like quo primum and different documents that you know, basically if you cough during the consecration, it's a mortal sin. I mean, it's just this weird attitude of God as like this I mean, the whole thing is crazy, and they bring that into Orthodoxy when they want to convert, and then they find out that it's not like that. There's economia, it's there's breathing room here, and then they say, well, that's all liberal. Well, the patriarchal system that developed canonically. It's not essential to the church. I mean, the church didn't have patriarchs in the 2nd century. Okay, so I mean, how were people saved at that time without the patriarchs? So you see what I'm saying? It's like a canonical thing that develops. It's a part of the governance of the church, but it's not essential to the church. It didn't exist for 300 years.
Yeah. And then my other question would be, and I basically understood that already. I mean, but it's just like sometimes you get like people where it's like it makes you they do the same thing with like how people will put videos of the Pope, like doing whatever thing, but they do that just with like different patriarchs, and they say, look at that.
Yeah, but the whole phronemen mindset is different. In the Roman Catholic world, there's an automatic self-excommunication that occurs when you have these kinds of actions. That's their system. Okay, so, but in the Orthodox world, it's synodal. So even though there might be a severance of communion between different patriarchs or whatever, like the excommunication is when it's recognized and the sacraments aren't accepted. So for example, if the MP excommunicates Bartholomew, that's the point at which the sacraments wouldn't be accepted anymore. And prior to that, they would be. So it sounds like your friend, although I'm assuming, wouldn't accept donatism, he's actually fallen into a kind of donatism.
Yeah, I think it's mostly because I think it was actually, to give him some credit, it was actually because of how tweaky they were at that whatever church he went to, like how
yeah, they're all a bunch of crazy mentally ill people there, and they're not. There's like literally like 5 people. It's like there's not very many people in these groups. They're very, very tiny. Anyway.
And then if I could ask, I was going to ask about Seraphim Rose in regards to that, but I guess and then my other question was, let's see here. Well, shoot, I can't find it. But,
that's okay. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I appreciate those questions, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Bayou Jarrett will do a few more. Let's see. Light Foam is being generous, sends $200 and then sends another $100 super chat. So thank you so much. Light Foam has definitely won the super chat of the week with these big fat super chats here. Thank you, Jay. Is there a distinct and succinct differentiation between a private opinion and ex cathedra when considering the vicar and papal infallibility? I would think the Roman Catholic would say that a private opinion would be things that are expressed by the Pope, like if he's writing a book or a treatise or a letter to someone specific. Those would be considered his private opinions. But, in the case of the example of Honorius, a private opinion is still enough to get him excommunicated. So he failed to teach correct Christology in that letter, and so he's excommunicated not just by the Sixth Council, but his excommunication is restated by the Seventh Council and in the Synodicon. So it's multiple times restated that he was condemned because of his theological errors and what he was saying to other bishops and for failing to teach Orthodoxy, you see. So this got Honorius excommunicated. And by the way, this all obviously just should be a defeater for Vatican I, but I'm sure they have infinite numbers of explanations and to make it unfalsifiable. But back to your question, I mean, ex cathedra in the Roman Catholic position really is not as hard to identify as some of the Roman Catholic theologians might think. It's basically just whenever he's speaking from the chair of Peter for the entire church on any issue of faith and morals. Those 3 things are enough to keep it under the charism of Peter and to make it ex cathedra or from the chair. The problem is that there's not a clear identifier as to when that is. So you have like, here's the criteria for dogma in the Roman Catholic world. good luck sifting through the documents to figure out when and where all that is. So there's not actually a list. That's the great irony of this position, is that you would think this position would, number one, have a list of what the dogmatic statements are, and some easily accessible book. There's not. It's not even Denzinger. Okay, Denzinger is like 750 pages or something. That's not that. There's much more than that. Okay, Denzinger isn't all of the papal writings which have universal ordinary teaching in them. And all of that's under the charism of Peter. So if you want to have the list of the infallible things, number one, it's not the 5 ex cathedra things. That's a total Catholic myth. And number two, you are, as an individual Catholic, going to have to sift through the giant piles of thousands of pages of papal encyclicals to try to figure out what fits into what category. So all of this papal stuff didn't do anybody any good to actually practically do the work. What's up, Bayou?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was wondering, do you believe that the Eastern Orthodox Church is the only church with a valid apostolic succession?
So I think that you could talk about there being a ritual that's done that the Orthodox Church can accept from those groups. And so in other words, let's say a Roman Catholic priest converts and he's going to come under like the Russian Orthodox Church. Oftentimes they don't redo the ritual necessarily. They may or they may not. It will be a case-by-case basis. So sometimes they can just receive a person and by economia, the ritual of ordination is accepted. But sometimes they decide, no, we don't really have a clear indicator that they were ordained. We don't really have a clear indicator of what kind of ordination rite was done. So we're going to go ahead and do the rite of ordination. So in the Orthodox world, it's much more of a decentralized decision of the bishop as to versus a one-size-fits-all. That decentralized economia approach can be abused, and you can have people who are ecumenists and then say, oh, well then it's all cool and all the churches have some form of apostolic succession. So you see how it can lead to like absurd opinions, but we do have a different view of sacraments than the Roman Catholic Church does. The Roman Catholic Church says a sacrament is present whenever and wherever there's matter, form, and intention. And this is a very late development and definition as to what constitutes it. That doesn't exist in the patristic era. It's a medieval development as to what constitutes the valid celebration of the sacrament. And this leads to really absurd things like Roman Catholics saying that Muslims and atheists can baptize people.
Wow. Okay. So you said there's different forms of apostolic succession. So
I didn't say that.
For instance,
that's not what I said.
I thought you said that.
So I mean, for us, let me rephrase it. For us, apostolic succession is not a mechanical thing that's just merely the laying on of hands. The apostolic succession is that's part of it, but it also means the apostolic faith. And so when people depart from the apostolic faith, even if they have correct rituals that they're doing, it really doesn't matter. And the only thing that's acceptable is that the Orthodox Church can decide the ritual doesn't have to be redone. It was done correctly. We're going to then, this person will have to abjure their heresies. The traditional approach is that they do an abjuration of heresy, meaning they reject all their previous errors. And they may or may not be baptized, chrismated, and ordained, depending upon a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so apostolic succession is laying on of hands and adhering to the apostolic faith. So
correct.
Protestants would say mainly the adhering to the apostolic faith is enough for apostolic succession. But
no, apostolic succession is a ritual of ordination to pass on the faith, as Paul says to Timothy in his 2 letters. And it's the passing on of the gift of the Holy Spirit. So Paul says, don't lay hands on anyone hastily because it's the gift of the Holy Spirit. There's no Protestant out there that I'm aware of that believes that there's a laying on of hands back to the apostles that passes the Holy Spirit.
Right, so you guys do believe that you have that. So for instance, your
correct.
Bishop
has
has some access to some type of apostolic genealogy, and he could trace his.
Yeah, when you go to Orthodox websites, you will see a list back to the apostles. Correct.
From your current bishop today.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. So if the Eastern Orthodox Church is the true church, the true body of Christ.
Yes.
So, you know, when Jesus talks about abiding in him, right? And if you don't abide in him, the branches that don't abide are cast into the flames and things like that. And I heard you say you guys aren't judging people's salvation and everything, but do you think that it's required to be in that true body of Christ, to abide in Christ?
Yes.
Okay, so people.
Yeah, I mean the typical patristic analogy is it's the ark, it's the ship, it's the tree, it's the sheepfold, it's all those things. It's the kingdom. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So, have you read the book, The Religion of the Apostles? Do you recommend that?
I've not personally read it, but all of my friends have interviewed Father Stephen DeYoung, and everybody says it's good, so I trust them.
Okay, and there was another book you mentioned that you recommend. Could you do you remember what that was? Not like a council or something like that. It was like just a book.
Well, I mean, it was a specific book for like Roman Catholics. It's a book called Two Paths by Michael Welton. But if you're not Roman Catholic, it might not really be that relevant to you.
Yeah, no, I'm Protestant. I'm just trying to learn more.
Rock and Sand would be the book you'd want if you're Protestant.
Rock and Sand.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Appreciate that. Jake, what's up, Jake? Jake, the Muslim metaphysician. Just kidding. It's not that Jake. It's a different Jake. You gotta unmute. Jake, you gotta unmute, man. Jake the Snake Roberts, what's up? All right. Can't hear him. Jeff. All right, I'm getting kind of tired, so guys, I gotta remind you, look, there's something I gotta tell you guys.
I want to show off something that we're all proud of. I got a browser here. This is Jay Dyer's much vaunted, much sought after Philosophy 101. Now, he just got this page up. We are just testing it out. You guys are some of the first people in the world to see it. I want to say, for my part, it's not Philosophy 101. I think this is a mistitling. I really think of it as like Philosophy Unleashed, because a Philosophy 101 course, they give you kind of some useless information that you can't make sense of. Jay actually lays out over 12 weeks, dozens and dozens of hours put into just the presentation of this, let alone the hundreds and thousands of hours of research that it takes to have a coherent evolution and history of the origins of philosophy, the uses of philosophy, the different ways to look at it over time, and how that has been brought about to what we have today, which is almost an absence of philosophy on the objective logic and reason side, and an overabundance of woke philosophy that is irrational and is made up day by day as people are like, I think we should bring racism.
So I wanted to have this on the live stream instead of the ad. So the easiest document that comes to mind that admits that there has been this evolution is the Alexandria document. So that's part of the Christian, what's the Vatican call it? The Christian Commission for Interreligious Dialogue with the Eastern Orthodox or something. They put out in 2016 a document called the Chieti document, Chieti. Now, the Chieti document is important, and it's kind of a predecessor to the Alexandria document. Both of them are very readable. They're not very long, but the Alexandria document from last year is way more expansive in its admissions than even the Chieti document was, which itself was very scandalous. So, by far, the Alexandria document basically admits about 90% of the Orthodox arguments.
Now, thank you so much. Do you have a fallback argument? my audience they're very much in that SSPX world, so they would be disinclined to accept anything coming after Vatican II. So do you have a fallback argument or document I could point them at to say, hey, look, the historical claims made by Pastor Eternus are just simply not present in the first millennium? Thank you.
I mean, I don't know that there's no way to solve that one without actually going into the historical stuff. So are you asking, is there, I mean, Leo the 13th's encyclicals, the one about the papacy, Satis Cognitum, I mean, it basically says that all of this is present in the first millennium. And it even says something at the beginning, something like, from the earliest days of the church, it was known in all parts of the world that the Roman See was, blah, 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 blah. So it's actually claiming, it's against the idea of development. So it's very odd, because what Newman claims about doctrinal development to help bolster Vatican I is not what Leo claims in Satis Cognitum. So there's like two rival views of how to understand, the papacy prior in the first millennium. So if your question is there a statement by the papacy that admits that it would be a defeater? I'm not aware of that, no. I think you just have to look at like the problem texts in the first millennium. Like, the reason that the Alexandria document is good for that is that although I understand your family and friends are not going to accept it as an authoritative document, the problem is that the arguments in the document are very difficult if you're a trad cat. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I would just say, whether they accept it or not, just reframe it and say, okay, well, you don't accept the document, but I mean, what about all of the admissions in this document? I mean, this document is basically making arguments that the Orthodox make and saying, oh, yeah, the Bishop of Rome didn't have universal jurisdiction in the first millennium. I mean...
Yeah, so many of my family, they're Beneficantists. They believe that they're basically Sedevacantists from Benedict's. Yeah, I know it's absurd.
Okay, here's the answer to that. Get John Pontrello's book, The Sedevacantist Delusion. And so even though I understand they're not strict Sedevacantists, the argumentation in that book will still refute their position.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, he has some really good points from encyclicals that many people are not familiar with. He's got some really good arguments from Etsi Multa, which shows that you can't have this kind of... In other words, I forget the other one. There's Etsi Multa and another one that are in part directed against the old Catholics. And even though Sedevacantists don't have the identical same position as old Catholics, the arguments that Etsi Multa uses against old Catholics apply to the Sedevacantists, and that's pretty devastating. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. Yes, it does. They would deny that they are Sedevacantists.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that whether they're Benevacantists or Sedeprivationists or Sedevacantists, the principle behind the arguments made in Etsi Multa against the old Catholics will apply to them.
I see your point. Yes, yes, I see.
And Pontrello brings that out, but you can also look up, he has two articles on Etsi Multa that will work. It's called, go to Sedevacantist Delusion is his website, and then just look up the two essays that he did on that encyclical. And then also the book is also good. Okay, there's two articles. The first one is called Etsi Multa right here. And again, this is a Pius the Ninth kill shot to the Sedevacantists 100 years before there were any sedevacantists or sedeprivationists or benevacantists or whatever, because it will undermine the entire approach of thinking that you can make any moves similar to what old Catholics tried to do. Then the other article is Etsi Multa Reloaded. This is a second article that he wrote, pointing out again everything that refutes old Catholics ends up ultimately refuting these people. So thank you for those questions. And ultimately, I think even though the Sedevacantist Delusion book is written against Sedevacantists, it will still work to refute your family and friends. How to refute family and friends. And here's Pontrello's book here, and we helped him in part. I mean, it was other people. We helped him convert to Russian Orthodoxy some years back. Kevin, what's up, Kevin?
Hello?
Hey.
Hey, how you doing, man?
What's up? What's on your mind?
So I've been like Protestant for about a year now. I watched your video, your debate against Redeemed Swimmer, and yeah, I've been definitely thinking about becoming Orthodox. I was just wondering, like, if you have any recommendations of like any books about like the faith, the ecumenical councils and all that type of thing, and just any advice, to get into Orthodox, basically.
Yeah, I would start with something like Rock and Sand. I would get something like John Meyendorf's book, The Orthodox Church, or those are good introductions. And then if you want to up the ante, get a little more theological, I would read on the Incarnation by St. Athanasius as a good introduction to the Church Fathers. And then I would read Mystical Theology of the Eastern Orthodox Church by Losky. And then I would read something like 5 Theological Orations of Gregory Nazianzus. James. You gotta unmute, man.
Oh, is it my turn?
Hey, what's up?
Hey there. So my question tonight is in regards to the Filioque way.
Okay.
And I hope I'm not too long-winded on this, but I'm still discerning a lot of things and whatnot. I've gone through. I know you just mentioned Athanasius, but on the Incarnation, I've gone through Cosmic Mystery of Christ by St. Maximus Confessor and all that. And
Cool.
But that's neither here nor there. But the Filioque way, I'm just wondering in regards to East versus West, and I'm wondering if this is kind of an existential thing for me, where if you have the Spirit proceeding just from the Father and also the Son's proceeding just from the Father, if you disconnect the Trinity from the Son and the Spirit, does that make sense?
No, nothing's disconnected. The Palamite synods and Gregory of Cyprus deal with the issue of the procession. It's through the Son. So the energies and the Holy Spirit proceed through the Son. So it's not disconnected from the Son. That view is rejected.
Okay. I just because of the basic diagram I always see, it's just the two arms coming.
Yeah, those diagrams are very limiting. They're not necessarily wrong, but they can only kind of capture part of the picture. But if you read the book Christus in Byzantium, that whole book is about that very question.
All right, could you post that in the YouTube chat? I'd like to click on that.
Yeah, there's also a significant portion of this new book also deals with that question. It doesn't deal with the question as much as the Christus in Byzantium book, but I don't know if it's maybe it's in print, but Papadakis and Meyendorf wrote this great book here called Christian East and the Rise of the Papacy, which is basically just covering the years of 1071 to 1453. But there's significant chapter in this that deals with that question specifically. But the other book is, let me see if it's available on Amazon. I'm not sure if it is. Let's see. But it's also Papadakis that wrote this book.
Okay. Yeah, because I always thought of it as just they were separate and disconnected.
No.
That almost seems to disrupt the harmony. But if it's all still together, then I'm like, okay.
No, in fact, that question comes up in these councils.
Okay. So. Okay, and then what was the other thing? Not the Eucharist. Not the divine mystery of the Eucharist. I can't think of it. I don't want to use it.
That's okay. Yeah, well, I mean, we do these a lot, so feel free to bring your questions back. But there's that Papadakis book there. Babar. This light is getting on my nerves. I'm gonna turn this off. We're gonna get weird in here. What's up?
Oh, nice. Hey, Jay. Thanks for taking my call here.
Yes, sir.
And blessed Holy Week to you. I actually just had a brief comment about a topic you covered a little while ago. I just recently listened to the stream, if you don't mind. It's about the David Icke and the simulation theory.
Okay.
It's just real brief. I mean, if it's off topic, no problem. But
go ahead.
So one thing I found, I read Icke back in the late 90s, I remember, like kind of before the internet. And I was kind of like, wow, this, kind of blew my mind. But I hadn't followed him in a long time. And then I caught that stream that he did with, I guess it was Alex Jones, and then that guy who sounds a lot like Elon Musk.
Okay. Yeah.
And when they had that conversation about transhumanism and the simulation and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And what I thought was, I mean, obviously it's all sort of incoherent, but what I found really incoherent about Icke's view was that he just seemed really freaked out about, like Neuralink and people like going into a simulation, that's being created by like tech companies. But then his whole worldview is that we're in an illusion and a simulation. So,
yeah.
In his worldview, why would that even be a problem?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no coherent ethic in that worldview. And that was one of the critiques that we pointed out in the simulation stream last week, right? That, I mean, if everything's a simulation, then anything that we try to do or predicate in regard to truth or false is immediately canceled out because it's part of the simulation. So, I mean, simulation is like the ultimate unfalsifiable thing because everything's part of the simulation. So,
right. Yeah. But my point is that he thinks we're already in a simulation.
Right.
But then he's just ringing the alarm bell that these people are creating a simulation. So what? I mean, that's just double simulation. I mean, what's the big deal in his worldview?
Sure.
So,
yeah. And so, and why would it be wrong? Like, on what basis is anything wrong? Because if I get rid of you, I mean, I haven't really done anything wrong because you're just a simulation. So, I mean,
it's just like playing Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, is it wrong for me to delete my sim character?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, I just wanted to make that point. Great stuff. I always enjoy your content. Thanks for letting me talk, Jay.
Thank you. Guys, look, come on now. We got to understand something. We got to have some principles and some order and some rules, some lawfare. What am I talking about? I'm talking about all the soy men out there who need to become toxic men. How do you become a toxic man? I'm going to tell you how right here.
I'm going to put you on something crazy real quick. Most of these Zoomer gym bros are consuming macro-guzzling synthetic dyes and synthetic sweeteners on the daily. They don't even know it. Goofy AF. There's nothing great about that. Do not listen any further unless you are an alpha or sigma male. This is important and there could be consequences. There's a new certified sigma male pre-workout powder for sigmas only. It is guaranteed to empower you to dominate your co-workers, fire your boss, aggressively gamble, or invade a small village. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, which are actually not natural at all, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Experience the pure goodness of Chad mode colored with organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine made in a sketchy Chinese lab. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract, which will get your mind going and pump you up to the max. Chad mode is made in America with all clean ingredients, the first clean pre-workout of its kind. Why are these people adding synthetic sweeteners to every single pre-workout when there are many studied downsides to consuming nasty fake sucralose? Each dose of Chad mode contains the kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad mode will allow you to fire your boss and dominate anyone who opposes you. Chad mode will make you more dominant in your daily life, so proceed with caution. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet organic fruit flavor. Chad mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Don't miss out. Secure your supply of Chad mode on TikTok Shop with a limited time massive discount.
I guess that's it. Thanks for
Yeah, good question, man. That book is really good. That chapter in Christian East and the Rise of the Papacy on this very issue, and what ends up solving it is the liturgy, right? So the text that ends up kind of settling the question is, "Thine own of thine own we offer unto thee," and the resolution is that it's not strictly speaking just the Father accepting the person of the Son. Rather, it's the person of the Son offering the deified human nature to the Father in the Holy Spirit. So it's a triadic offering that the Son is offering the nature to the human nature to the Trinity, and so thereby deifying and reconciling us to God. So it's a Christus Victor act of love, according to that resolution in that 1100s Byzantine Synod. This is also mentioned in Pomazanski's Dogmatic Theology too. He has a few pages on this controversy with Soteriology, and it actually refutes the Protestant view. So if people are interested in what's the Orthodox view of the atonement, it's settled in this 11th century or 1100s Byzantine Synod condemnation of Soteriology. Pavel, I'm getting my mind is getting kind of mush. This is the third show I've done today, so my mind is kind of mush by now.
Hello.
What's up, man?
Yeah, hello. Hi. Thanks for having me again. Just a quick note. The recommendation you gave me last time, the John McGuckin book, got that. We'll get on that in the next week. Today, since we're talking about Catholics, I wanted to get into the famous document, the Vatican II documents, and then, of course, the famous bit, the 16th paragraph of second chapter, if I remember correctly, the Lumen Gentium. So you've mentioned it several times, and it speaks about Muslims who profess
well,
the same.
To be specific, it is in Lumen Gentium, but I'm talking usually about Nostra Aetate.
Okay, yeah. So, right. So it was again the 16th paragraph, I think it was.
Okay.
So it talks about Muslims, them professing holds to the same faith of Abraham, and along with us adore the one and merciful God. So
right.
Not a merciful God, the one and merciful
Correct.
God.
Adoration is also, by the way, worship. So it's not just a mental recognizing or a conceptual. It's specifically said to be in the context of worshiping, and Nostra Aetate speaks that way too.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. So now, after reading that, I thought to myself, because I'm sure you know with your experience and studies that sometimes when you translate from language to language, then you need to add something or take something away for it to make sense. So I thought to myself, maybe this is a nuance of the English language. I wanted to go ahead and read the Latin version to give them benefit of the doubt. And it turns out that's even worse because
really?
Because in Latin, I'm not great at Latin, but I had a lot of Latin at school. So in Latin, it says, nobiscum deum adorant unicum. So nobiscum with us, deum adorant, adore God. Unicum, unique, excluding others. So this is definitely not the case of, well, let's just be friends, which maybe if not encouraged, could at least be understood. I mean, yeah, sure, let's be nice, I guess. But this excludes others. So together with us, adore the unique God. So that's even worse than the God.
Oh, wow. Okay, so hold on. I'm pulling it up. So Lumen Gentium 16, where are you at?
16, so it's...
okay, I got it. Okay.
Chapter 2, 16th paragraph, 100 and... Oh, man, I don't remember that. 16th paragraph. Try... Yeah,
I'm at it. I'm at it right now. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, go ahead.
So seeing that, how it's even... by the way, funnily enough, the Vatican archives, at least there, it wasn't translated to Russian or Greek, because I wanted to have a look at that as well, which is funny considering their ecumenism, right? I mean, why wouldn't you translate it? But, well, whatever. But then the next bit that really caught my attention, and this is where I wanted to ask you, maybe that I misunderstand it somehow, and that's the same paragraph, but it's a different bit. I'm opening it. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'm just pulling up Nostra Aetate to go along with it because it's very forceful in its language as well.
For it is he who gives all men life and breath and all things, and as Savior wills that all men be saved. Now, I understand that in English the meaning of that is similar, but it's still not something that I would use when, say, he hopes or he wishes, or, I mean, wills is, I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here. Is that a Presbyterian thing? Is that a sola gratia thing where, is it similar to that, where, I mean, no matter what I do, he still wants me, or I will be saved? Is that the case, or am I misunderstanding here?
Well, I mean, I think it's just, I mean, it's Pauline language that, you know, God desires all men to be saved is, I think, what they mean. I don't know the Latin, but I'm assuming that that's what a Roman Catholic would say.
Right. Okay, so maybe I'm just
I think the confusion, though, is that when you put that phrase there, it makes it sound like, well, because God wills all men to be saved, thus this is why the faith of Abraham is the same God as us. So God, in other words, God recognizes that they have the faith of Abraham because he wants all men to be saved. And that's why in Nostra Aetate, it actually reads like they are not just acknowledging the one God, but actually worshiping him. And it's the same for Hindus.
Yeah.
That Hindus also approach God as Hindus. That's the problem here. It's like, it's not that they can't be saved. It's that it's not talking like they're in a demonic religion. It's like they're in a religion that still worships God, but kind of has these problems in it.
It's a sort of a how would I put it? It's almost like a recommendation. It reads to me almost like a recommendation. Hey, you might as well. Hey, check this out, because we have these Muslim brothers, and they acknowledge the Creator, the One and Merciful.
Correct.
It sounds almost like, hey, check it out.
No, I think you're right. I mean, and the actions of the papacy validate that, because they're going and praying in the mosque towards Mecca. And now Nostra Aetate says the church regards with esteem the Muslims. Really? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's an antichrist religion that persecutes and destroys and hates the church. Why would we do we also esteem the Jehovah's Witnesses? Because they adore. So adoration in Roman Catholic terminology is a very specific word, right? Roman Catholics, when they hear the word adore, that means Eucharistic adoration. That's what they associate it with. So the choice of this terminology of adoring the one God is I think, very specific, and moves it beyond just natural theology in terms of like the idea of having a conception of there being one God, or the idea of there being monotheism. No. Now they actually worship God, and it gives the impression that it says that they take pains to submit to his inscrutable decrees, just as Abraham did. And that means this implies that God accepts that. But that's not true. Number one, the faith of Abraham is Trinitarian, according to Jesus. It's not belief in a Unitarian God. And that's why when I brought this up to Trent Horn in our debate, that's where it really broke down, and Trent's position collapsed, and he was forced to say, well, no, in the Old Testament they're worshiping a Unitarian God, because he knows that that's what his Nostra Aetate Lumen Gentium teaching is.
Yeah. The other bit where I said the Savior wills, it wasn't actually about Muslims. That was about supposed people. So the full, because I.
Okay. So this is like atheists and pagans, basically.
Yeah, that was my question. So, nor is it far distant from those who, in shadows and images, seek the unknown God. What is that? Which shadows, which images are they talking about? Is it?
It's talking about pagan religions. So, like, basically, all the world religions have some, shadows and images of the truth, of the logos spermaticos. So they're saved in those religions, despite those religions, is the way that, like, Benedict and some of the Vatican II, popes and theologians explain it. But this is also the basis for Francis. Remember Francis's statement a while back that even atheists can be saved? some scandalous statement like that. Well, he's pulling from this. So I think you're right. This is going beyond than just the Muslims, but basically it's encapsulating everything that came before that. Savior wills all men to be saved, to try to say that, well, because God wills all men to be saved, he must then provide a way for everybody to be saved in all these false religions. Which the problem though is that it speaks as if God is also accepting the worship of all these false religions. It's just where it gets really weird.
Would you say that this ties somehow, for them at least, from their point of view, to the idea of general revelation?
Well, for them, it's natural theology. So
to them, this has nothing to do with any kind of nuance where. So there's this famous question, right? How do people get saved through Jesus if they don't know Jesus? And very often I hear the answer being general revelation. Well, one of the answers I hear often. So do you think this is not that? Do you think that that's just universal salvation across the board?
No, I think they would say what you're saying. They would say, God meets them where they're at. So there is some sort of general revelation by which somehow they're given grace or something. I think that's what they would typically say. I mean, they talk about invincible ignorance. So the Roman Catholic view usually says those who, through no fault of their own, are born into pagan religions are in a state of invincible ignorance, and so they're not held liable for that. And then they'll say, well, Romans 2 says that God judges them on the basis of the amount of law or light that they've been given. And I think there's some truth to that. But I mean, the problem is that all of this gives the impression that because God can reach a person outside of the normal means, then therefore all of the religions are on a scale, you see, and all of them are really part of this. And so basically the Pope is now like the head of all the world religions, you see. This is where Fratelli Tutti, Francis's encyclical, kind of takes it to that conclusion. And this is why you get Francis in that encyclical saying, here's prayers for non-Catholic Christians, here's prayers for Unitarians who don't believe in the Trinity.
Okay.
No, there's no praying together with Unitarians. This is ridiculous. But that's the logic of this.
Right. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, thank you very much. That's what I was, because I'm trying to understand it from their point of view. I'm sorry to everyone who's waiting. Very quick other question. This is one about the concept of ex cathedra. Am I making a logical error when I think that if ex cathedra, then the only person who can ever be a heretic is the Pope? Or is that...
Yeah, that's an argument I made, but I mean, it's like, that has to do with when they say that, well, he's not, Francis isn't a heretic, or whoever isn't a heretic, because they didn't bind everybody to it. As if binding people to it had anything to do with being a heretic. And that's when that's when I make the rhetorical point that, well, if that was the case, then only the Pope could be a heretic, because only the Pope can bind everybody to a doctrine.
Okay, perfect, good. Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the talk.
Yeah, it's just a rhetorical point. Thank you. We'll do one more. I'm really, really tired. Big Bear. Yeah, we already did your question, Big Joe. I'm not trying to be rude. Get this last Bigly Brain Bear. You have to unmute.
Hey, what's up, Jay?
Yo.
Yeah, so my assertion, I actually had a Twitter debate on this a while back, but I'm a Protestant and I believe in the Protestant canon. I think that it's the only historically tenable canon to hold to. I've looked at all the councils that the Orthodox base their canon off of, and I'll say it's a lot more coherent, at least in the Latin version, which was invented basically in the 15th century. But
wait,
yeah,
what was invented? What was invented?
The Roman Catholic canon.
I mean, it comes from the councils under Damasus. What do you mean it was invented?
Oh, are you talking about the Council of Rome?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was actually something that I had to dig deep into, because the whole Council of Rome thing, like, we have a few, this might be something of interest to you, but we only have a little bit of actual writing on it from Jerome and maybe one other early father. Like, the majority of writing on it is based off of this, like, 7th century recension, which later 17th century Roman Catholic scholars interpreted and sort of, like, anachronistically attributed to Pope Damasus. So
Okay.
there are no extant documents of the Council of Rome. Yeah.
Okay.
And like
Well-
the sort of the key fact there is that the document quotes St. Augustine writing 30 years after the actual council occurred. So it's certainly not from Pope Damasus.
Well, just because it's later doesn't necessarily mean it's not from him, but you're saying that there's no contemporary extant document that is from Damasus, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you could sort of compound that with all of the, I don't think they started collecting decretals until right after Pope Damasus. I don't know who it was, but that's like the first recorded actual decretal, according to the historians.
Okay, and so why are we supposed to have the Protestant canon?
Because I would hold, and I think this is, I mean, it's not perfect, it's a historical case, but I would hold to it as being the same one that the Jews held to.
Okay, why does that matter?
Well, if the Jews were entrusted
Did Jesus set up rabbinical Jews to be the authority of his church?
No, but if he's referring to the scriptures
No,
at his time,
no.
right?
Who did Jesus establish as authorities in the church? Different question.
I'm confused. What do you mean?
I'm not asking you what did he appeal to when he's arguing with Pharisees. When he set up his church, who did he set up as authorities in his church? Rabbis, rabbinical authorities?
I'm sure you have a verse you're thinking of, but
I'm not thinking of a verse. I'm thinking of many verses. It's a very obvious, simple question.
Yeah, well, the way I'd look at it is that when he's quoting scripture
No,
and when he
no,
refers to
it's not what I said.
holding them accountable to scripture.
So you're not going to answer. So you're not going to answer the question. How many times do I have to ask the question?
I'm like a college student, so I'm probably not getting what you're trying to say.
So I'm not trying to be mean to you. I'll ask it for the third time. When Jesus set up his church, who did he establish to be authorities in that church? Rabbinical traditions and Pharisees?
No. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, he set up his apostles. He trusted them with the church.
Okay. So when they went out and set up churches, right? They went out in the Roman Empire. You agree with that, right? Set up churches?
Yeah.
Okay. When they went out and set up those churches, were they empowered at Pentecost?
Yeah.
Okay. Did Jesus say to them, "He who hears you hears me"?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that in Paul's epistles to Timothy, that he says things like, "Pass on to men after you all the things you heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, and don't hastily lay hands on anyone because the gift of the Holy Spirit is given in that"?
Yeah, that sounds valid. Yeah.
Okay. So if that's the model that Paul sets up in Ephesus, where Timothy is, does it follow that Timothy laid his hands on people after him?
Yeah.
Okay. Would that be the same structure of the church that we're talking about, where Jesus said, "He who hears you hears me"?
Yeah.
Okay. So if Paul gave Timothy the authority in Ephesus, doesn't it seem to follow that Timothy would give the people after him that he lays hands on authority?
Oh, this is apostolic succession.
Apostolic succession.
Apostolic succession. Okay. Yeah.
Did that die after Timothy?
Well, it seems no, because I'm an Anglican, so I believe there is like a chain of command.
Okay, but wait a minute. Anglicans don't believe, as far as I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Anglicans don't believe that the Holy Spirit is given in that right, do they?
No, we don't believe it in the same way you do, but I do believe there's like a legitimate office that's being maintained throughout churches.
Okay, but didn't Paul tell Timothy that he would be giving the gift of the Holy Spirit in that ritual and that rite?
I suppose so.
Okay. So there we have, I think, the point of division here ultimately, which is that from our perspective, the people who then succeed Paul and Timothy, not just at Ephesus, but obviously at every church where the apostles went out and set up churches, they end up having that normative authority. So it's not just a question of what abstract set of books do we think of as authoritative, but rather, as Paul says, the church is the pillar and ground of truth, not the written text, and thus this group of people, this body, would then have normative authority. That means the ability to decide and bind people's consciences to what list of books go into it. That's why I believe my view and my canon. Whereas, and I'm not being mean to you, but I don't think your position will be able to have normative authority because of the point that we just made with the Holy Spirit not being given there.
Okay. So how then would that's why I don't appreciate it, to be honest, when Protestants sort of ignore church history and like abstractly look at scripture.
Yeah, but I mean, you're still Protestant, so I mean, you're still in the same camp. So you might like those councils, but they don't have any normative authority.
Well, I feel like I have to weigh them, because when I'm looking at the earliest documents, like Melito of Sardis, who got his who got his canon list, which is the oldest one we have.
Yeah, but it's not the Protestant canon.
It isn't?
No. Go look up the video that I put up. Well, you can look at the debate that Trent Horn had with James White, and then look up Sam Shamoun's commentary on it, and he goes into depth about Melito's canon is not the Protestant canon.
Huh. Okay, I'll have to look.
And that was one of the it's one of the key areas where James White really messed up in that debate, because White was trying to argue that Melito's canon is the Protestant canon. But even if Melito did have the Protestant canon, on what basis are we supposed to accept Melito's canon because he's early? I mean, there's all kinds of things that you don't accept that are early.
That's why like when we're putting on the laying on of hands, like we're having that authority maintained. But I wouldn't say necessarily that every tradition is being well maintained.
Right, but I'm not talking about every tradition. What I was talking about was normative authority, that there is some body of people that succeed the apostles that have authority. He who hears you hears me.
Yeah. And then
hold on. So I'm not trying to be like this is like the third podcast I've done today, so my mind is totally mush. So just call in next time and I'll remember you, because you're a civil, humble dude. We had a good conversation. So let's pick this up next time. I'm just like super, super tired after like 3 podcasts. So my mind is mush. But thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Bigly Bear, we'll go back to you next time you're available. Guys, remember to head on over to chalk.com. Use promo code J50 to get 50% off. And also head on over to our Eventbrite page to get tickets to our event in Vegas. It's going to be a lot of fun. We just added Jim Bob will be there with us. So if you're a Jim Bob fan, he's going to be showing up. He decided that he could make it down there with us, and so he'll be taking a few questions with me on a panel. I'm sure he'll have his books and his memes and all of that. His merch will be there, so you get to meet him. Jamie Kennedy, Isaac Weishaupt, Jamie Hanshaw. We're all going to be having a lot of fun. Get your tickets right there. Head on over to chalk.com. Use promo code J50, 50% off all those great products.